back, guys. This is Unit 2, Molecules of Life. So, last time we talked about what makes living things living, and with this unit, we're going to talk about uh, the building blocks of those living organisms. So, we have a couple terms. We have organic compounds and macromolecules. Organic compounds are just compounds that contain carbon. So let me give you an example. H2O, which is water, that is not an organic compound. That is an inorganic compound. Only because there's no carbon. There's two hydrogens and there's one oxygen. Okay, let's look at glucose. Glucose is a sugar, and its formula is C6H12O6. Well, there are 6 carbons. That's what the C stands for. There's 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. That is an organic compound because it does contain carbon. So anything that contains carbon is an organic compound. The other term is macromolecule. The term macro simply means big or large. So this means large molecule. So that just happens when smaller molecules bond together to make a large molecule. So when two small building blocks come together, they join to form a macromolecule. Remember, macro means large molecule. So there are 4 types of macromolecules, large molecules. They're the carbohydrates. You guys call them carbs. That's your sugars, your starches. Those are carbohydrates. You have your lipids. Those are your fats. Proteins. You find that in your meats, your chickens, your turkeys, a lot of your lean meats, and your nucleic acids. And no one is really familiar with nucleic acids. You hear of carbs and lipids, proteins, but nucleic acids, and that could be the most important of the 4, and we'll talk about that one shortly. So here's a pixelated picture of some carbohydrates. You see glucose here. This is glucose. This fructose, sucrose, lactose. If you're lactose intolerant, this is the sugar that you are allergic to. This is lactose. This is the sugar that's commonly found in milk, unless you get the lactose-free milk, which I've never tried that, so I don't know what that tastes like. But this is the sugar in milk. Fructose, you find a lot of that in like fruits. Sucrose, apricots, pineapples, you would find sucrose in that. So remember, a carb is an organic macromolecule. It's composed of, all the carbs are composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So look at the name, carbo, that's carbon, and then hydrate. Hydrates, that's water. So carbon and water. Water is hydrogen and oxygen. So remember that, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It goes with their name, carbo and hydrate. When you hydrate yourself, you need water. You need hydrogen and oxygen. So a carbohydrate is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. These things are a great source of energy. So a lot of the times, especially the football players, before an away game, they have a meal of spaghetti or some sort of pasta, because these carbohydrates store a lot of their energy in their bonds. So that's why we eat carbs before a game or whatever, because there's energy stored in their bonds, and there's a lot of energy stored in there. But if we don't go to that game or go do the practice or whatever we're eating that massive carbs for, if we don't do that, if we eat a carb overload and then we sit on the couch and watch TV, that's the reason we get fat. So we store those carbs, those are energy, so we store those, and then that storage turns into fat deposits. All right, so the first type of carb is a simple carb, and that's just one sugar molecule. All right, you get glucose from a plant, fructose from fruits on a plant, so like an apple or a banana. So just one building block. All right, you have your complex carbs. So these are disaccharides. Di means two, saccharides, it's just sugar. So sucrose is just a combination of glucose plus fructose. Lactose is glucose plus galactose. Maltose is glucose plus glucose. Okay, so here's a glucose and a fructose, that's sucrose, and there's a galactose and a glucose, that is lactose. Okay, so this is what the sugar that looks like in your milk that you would be allergic to if you are lactose intolerant. Okay, the last carb we have is a very complex carb. These are called polysaccharides. Polysaccharides. So for example, starch. Cellulose, that's in wood, for example. Sawdust would have a lot of cellulose. Cell walls are made of cellulose. The bark from trees are made of cellulose. Also glycogen, that's when we have more glucose in our blood, it is stored as a glycogen in our liver. So cellulose in wood. We humans cannot dissolve cellulose, but horses and cows can. So interesting facts about carbs. Glucose is the main sugar used by the body. And think of glucose as an unrefined fuel. And let me give you an example. So oil makes gasoline. So you have oil, you mine for oil, and you have to refine that oil to make gasoline. So you can't put oil directly into the car. The car doesn't run on oil. But the modified version of that oil, gasoline, powers the car. So that the analogy goes back to us. Glucose is like the oil. So it's unrefined. So we can't run on glucose by itself. The body converts it into what it can use, which is the ATP. This is our gasoline. This is the most important molecule in the body. So without ATP, you wouldn't be able to do anything. So this is the fuel that keeps you moving, and everything you do involves movement or burning this compound. So without burning through your ATP storage, you couldn't think, you couldn't talk, you couldn't sit in a chair. Because even though you don't think about it, just by sitting in a chair, your muscles in your back are tightening, constricting, and to keep you upright. So, like I said, everything that you do burns through your energy, burns through your ATP. So without your back muscles constricting and contracting and releasing and tightening, you wouldn't be able to sit in a chair. Your digestion wouldn't be able to happen. You couldn't digest food. So everything that you do, you have to think ATP for it. What I mentioned earlier about cellulose, cows and horses can digest cellulose, the stuff found in plants, because they have tiny little microorganisms that live in their stomach, and those actually are the things that break down the cellulose. So without those little tiny microorganisms, The cows and the horses couldn't break down that stuff either, but they have those guys living in their guts, so they break it down for them. We don't have those same microorganisms living in our guts. That's the reason that we can't break down cellulose. This pretty picture, this is a fatty acid. So the glycerol, and you have 3 fatty acid chains. So lipids are organic macromolecules, and they do not dissolve in water. And they are useful for storing energy too, because they contain a lot more bonds than the carbohydrates. And like I showed you in the picture, they're made of a glycerol, which is the top unit. This chain, this little part here, that's the glycerol up at the top, and it's made of 3 fatty acid chains. So there's 1 fatty acid chain, 2 fatty acid chains, and a 3rd fatty acid chain. All right, there are 3 types of lipids. Okay, let those come up. All right, so you have fats. So that's just the normal fat on your body. And the purpose of that fat on your body is to store energy. So if you don't use, like I said before, if you don't use those carbs right away, they store themselves as fat on your body. Okay. The second type of lipid is a steroid. So a lot of you guys are familiar with anabolic steroids or the human growth hormone, HGH. A lot of athletes take this to get bigger. But testosterone, guys produce, so do women, but guys produce 15 times more testosterone than women do. Testosterone is a steroid. Cholesterol is in the lining of the cell membrane. That is a steroid. People don't think of cholesterol as a steroid, but it is a type of a steroid. And also waxes, those are just protective coatings on surfaces. And then I'll give you examples here shortly of waxes. So there's 2 types of fat. Fat can either be saturated, and if you have a saturated fat, you know it's a saturated fat because it is solid at room temperature. So you have your butter, your lards, your greases, all those things that are solid that you cook with them, margarine, those are saturated fats. So if you see it in a form like this, it looks like one long chain. So the carbon atoms are bonded to 2 hydrogen atoms. So the carbon has 2 hydrogens that it's bonded to. Okay, that's saturated fat, saturated. The next example is unsaturated fat. So if you look at this first, you see how the other one was, go back, the other one was a straight chain. Okay, this one you have one case where the carbon is doubly bonded to another carbon, and this causes a little bend in the molecule. Okay, so these are unsaturated fats. So these are liquid fats that are liquid at room temperature. So the other ones were solid, and those were less healthy, led to heart disease. These are mostly liquids at room temperature, like corn oil and olive oil and fish oil and canola oil. All those are unsaturated fats. And it's a better alternative to have these as opposed to the saturated fats. That's unsaturated. Healthier. All right, the second type is steroid. So these are 4 examples. So testosterone cortisone, vitamin D, and cholesterol. These are all 4 examples of a steroid. So you should remember, if I asked you for an example of a steroid, you should be able to list these 4 things. You don't have to draw what they look like. Just be able to tell me testosterone, cortisone, vitamin D, and cholesterol. Okay? Interesting story about vitamin D. Our body cannot synthesize vitamin D on its own. We get vitamin D through sunlight. So you go outside on a nice warm day, you let the UV rays hit you, and that's how your body synthesizes vitamin D. But you can't, the body doesn't make that on its own. The third type of lipid is waxes. Waxes also are organic macromolecules. They serve as a protective layer and make things waterproof. So if you've ever picked up a plant and there's like a waxy substance on the outside of the plant, that's called the cuticle, but that is a wax. So that's a lipid. And also your earwax. So if you reach in your ear and pull out a big heaping helping of earwax, that is a lipid, and that's for protection inside your ear canal. All right, up next, the probably the most well-known protein. That's a big picture of a protein molecule. So again, once again, organic macromolecules. Those are the 2 things that everything are. Everything's organic and everything's a macromolecule. These 4 things that we're learning. These are the building blocks of the cells. So without protein, you wouldn't be able to build your body. You couldn't build your muscles. And that's what a lot of guys, especially the football players, they take a lot of protein supplements, protein shakes, protein drinks, protein bars, just to build up those muscles. So when they hit the gym and they make their muscles sore, the reason a muscle gets sore is you're causing micro tears in the muscle. So, and the body needs protein to fix these micro tears. So when you eat and drink all these extra supplements, you have a surplus of protein in your body. So that goes to rebuilding and making those muscles even bigger. But it doesn't just make the muscles, it makes your skin, your blood, your hair is made from protein, your fingernails are made of protein. So basically everything that we see on our outward appearance is made from protein. So our bodies contain thousands of different protein, and they're just made by a combination of these guys here. See, this picture to your right is a picture of protein. So this little chain here is protein. These little circles on the chain, those are amino acids. So different combinations of these amino acids produce a different protein. Okay? And there are only 20 of these amino acids. So the different combinations of 20 amino acids can lead to 1,000 different proteins. Okay, and like I said, the whole chain is a protein. These individual beads are the amino acid. And there are 20 different of those amino acids, and they all, make sure you know this form. They all have this form in common. So the only thing different about an amino acid is this little R group, and that could be anything. There's 20 different R groups, but this stuff in the middle, so this here, let me draw it for you. So this here, so every amino acid has that shape that I circled. The only difference is this. And I'll show you examples here in a second. But there are 20 different types. So let's go to the next one. All right, so in the blue, blue. All right, so the things I circled and the other ones in the blue are what you put in the last drawing, the R group. So the blue is the R group. That's the R group, R group, R group. Okay, the name of this one, this here, that's alanine. Okay, this one here is valine, leucine. See, there's 20. The R groups get complicated, but the actual main part is always the same thing. So the actual main part of the amino is always that. All right, so there's 20 amino acids. Right. Enzymes are another form of a protein. These help catalyze the reaction. So that means they help speed up the reaction. So they help speed up the reaction. That should be an arrow. They help speed up the reaction. And with an enzyme, it needs less energy if you're using an enzyme than if you're not using an enzyme. So less energy is needed for the reaction. That's what enzymes do. They help speed up the reaction. All right, nucleic acids. So again, organic macromolecules. These are used to control your genetic information. So they control your genetic information. These are stored in the nucleus of the cell. These are stored in the nucleus of a cell, and these nucleic acids are made up of very long chains of nucleotides. And over here is a picture of what a nucleotide looks like. All right, so it's made up of a sugar. That sugar in this case is called a deoxyribose. It's made up of a phosphate, and then it's made up of it's made up of a nitrogen base. So every nucleotide contains a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogen base. So a sugar, a phosphate, a nitrogen base. And those are nucleotides. Nucleotides. So a long chain of nucleotides. And there are two types of nucleic acids, only two types. DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA, which stands for ribonucleic acid. DNA is the blueprint of life. So we are the way we are because DNA says that's the way we should be. So all the proteins we make are because of our genes, and those genes are located on our DNA. So DNA codes for proteins, those proteins I talked about earlier. So DNA codes for them. RNA takes that code and actually makes those proteins. So DNA has the copy. RNA kind of copies DNA's code and then takes that and makes its information. So they work in tandem. Okay. Any questions? I mean, this is, we're starting to get into it. So it gets a bit more complicated, and that's why these lectures are here. So at any point you want to go back and listen to another segment again, that's fine. these are going to be on the site, and you can use them at your own discretion. Okay, just go back and look over this material. Do you remember the 4 parts? If you have any questions, feel free to email me, talk to me. I'll let you one of these are my 2 favorite quotes. Um, there is nothing so captivating as new knowledge. That's an important one. But all right, guys, I'm going to end the video here. Get with me if you have any questions. Let me know how you feel about this. But I will catch you on the next ones. See you guys.